Morning troops, Harry Veteran Dave here. So I recently read an article about two World War I memorials in memory of two pilots that tragically died in my local area. So I decided to do some research to try and find the memorials and tell their story, which sadly ended in a farmer's field in Wickford, here in Essex. On the night of the 7th of March 1918, the Germans launched a bombing raid on London. Local aerodromes were alerted to a German Gotha heavy bomber on its way to drop its deadly payload, which was using the Thames as a navigational guide to bring fire down on the capital. It was a moonless night with bad weather conditions, and most fighter aircraft had been grounded that night due to poor visibility. However, with the imminent threat, two aircraft were scrambled into the air that night, charged with intercepting and destroying the enemy. The first pilot to take off was Captain Alexander Bruce Kinnock of 37 Squadron Royal Flying Corps, based at Stowe Marie's airfield. He took to the air at 23:29 hours, flying a BE-12 fighter plane, tail number 3208. Born on the 5th of January 1894, Captain Kinnock commissioned into the Duke of Wellington's regiment, serving in Egypt, Gallipoli and Macedonia. He gained his flying certificate and graduated as a flying officer on Christmas Day 1917. Just a minute later at 23:30 hours, a second pilot, Captain Henry Clifford Stroud of 61 Squadron RFC, took to the air in his SE-5 fighter aircraft, tail number B679, from Rochford Aerodrome to intercept the same enemy bomber. Born on the 25th of July 1893, Captain Stroud was commissioned into the Northumbrian Engineers in 1912. On the outbreak of war, he was sent to France only to be seriously injured and shipped back to England. With his injuries making a return to the front line impossible, Captain Stroud qualified as a pilot in August 1916. Aircraft in World War I were very basic and had no navigational aids. The pilots would have had a map strapped to their leg with the torch to navigate and did not have any means to communicate with each other. Tragically, in the poor conditions and at around midnight, the two planes collided with each other over the area of Dollyman's farm in Wickford on their way to intercept the enemy, and crashed, killing both pilots. The collision was witnessed by a local farmer, Mr. William Wilson. Along with his sister Joan, Mr. Wilson headed towards Dollyman's farm and were the first two people to reach the crash site. Once the bodies and wreckage were removed, Mr. Wilson, who was the landowner, erected a fence around the crash sites and erected a cross with the propeller blades at each location, around 250 metres apart. In the 1960s, when Mr. Wilson sold the land, he stipulated that the memorials must remain. They are now Grade 2 listed memorials. Well, I've now reached the area of the memorials, which are well off the beaten path. Over the years, the propellers have been replaced on several occasions, as sadly there are people that would sink low enough to steal from war memorials. There is only now one propeller left. It is also very sad to report that the memorials are not in the best of conditions. However, I will be laying a cross at both sites as a mark of respect and remembrance on behalf of the hairy veterans. Carrying out the research on this incident and the pilots has really struck a personal chord with me, and I felt compelled to follow up with not so much of a part 2, but more of an epilogue. And I've decided to see what became of the airfields where they were based and took off from on that fateful night, and to finish their story, to visit their final places of rest. On the night of the 7th of March, Captain Stroud took off from what was then RFC Rochford, where many units of the Royal Flying Corps were based, including 61 Squadron. After the war, the area reverted back to farmland until the airfield was bought by Southend Borough Council in 1933. In 1939, the airfield was requisitioned by the Air Ministry and was initially named RAF Rochford, changing eventually to RAF Southend. During World War II, it was the base for Supermarine Spitfires and Hawker Hurricane fighter aircraft, as well as Bristol Blenheim light bombers, all of which took an active part in the Battle of Britain. Today, the airfield is Southend's airport, used for commercial and passenger planes, a destination for many holiday makers on their way on their sunny holidays. I have flown from Southend myself on 2 occasions. The runway is literally just a few hundred metres south of my location, although there are clues to Southend Airport's past, like this pillbox behind me, which would have been used to defend the airfield in times of war. I am now at St Andrew's Church in Rochford, which is the final resting place for Captain Henry Clifford Stroud. I am hoping to locate his grave to pay my respects. So I have managed to find the grave of Captain Stroud. Although located with other Commonwealth War graves, Captain Stroud's grave is not marked with a headstone. It does have a plaque placed on the grave, which is also the resting place of his parents, Dr. Henry and Mrs. Eva Stroud. I've placed a cross on the grave in remembrance on behalf of the Hairy veterans. I'll let you into a little secret. I spent a considerable amount of time looking for this grave last week without success. After more research, it became apparent that there were 2 St Andrew's churches in this area. I'd like to think of Captain Stroud having a good laugh at me up there at my expense, as I spent an hour and a half searching the cemetery of the wrong church. I'm now at Stowe Marie's Aerodrome, which is where Captain Kinnock took off from on that fateful night. The airfield is now open to the public as a museum and still boasts many of the original buildings. The airfield is still operational for vintage aircraft and hosts many events. I'm rather excited to have a look around. The airfield really is worth a visit. It's not just a home to many vintage aircraft, it also has a number of period vehicles on display. Many of the original buildings survive, including the pilot's ready room. You can even have lunch in the original airman's mess. The aerodrome is run by a number of volunteers that give up their time to keep the site running and provide tours and information. The aerodrome really does rely on visitors to this amazing site to keep the history alive and to ensure that all that served here are never forgotten. The memorial names those of 37 Squadron that made the ultimate sacrifice between 1916 and 1919, including Captain Kinnock. To finish my story of these brave airmen, I'm now on a train on my way to Islington and St Pancras Cemetery in North London, which is the final resting place of Captain Alexander Bruce Kinnock. Although only the third largest cemetery in London, Islington and St Pancras Cemetery, in terms of the number of interments, is the largest in the UK, with around 1 million burials and cremations. My research has given me the plot number of the grave, so I'm hoping to find Captain Kinnock. So I have found Captain Kinnock in what is a fascinating and ancient cemetery. I feel rather sad that I have come to the end of these two pilots' story. I passionately believe that those who made the ultimate sacrifice should never be forgotten, and that their stories should continue to be retold so they are remembered by future generations.